Equals Boston, February 1940. Snow fell thick against the brick houses on Beacon Hill as Claire Donovan read the newspaper under the glow of a desk lamp. The headline shouted of war in Europe, of German troops marching through Poland and Norway. Below the fold, a small notice sought volunteers for the American Field Service, ambulance drivers to aid the French army. Claire traced the words with her gloved finger, heart hammering. Her father had served in the last war. She felt the same stirring now, a call born from conscience and courage. She packed one suitcase, tucked her nursing credentials beside a worn photograph of her family, and boarded the SS Manhattan bound for Le Havre. The ocean voyage was long, filled with the ominous hum of distant events. On deck at night, she watched the gray Atlantic roll endlessly and wondered if she would ever see home again.
France, March 1940. The port of Le Havre smelled of diesel and salt, alive with the clatter of soldiers and refugees. Claire stood among crates marked medical supplies as a uniformed officer welcomed the new volunteers. The air was sharp with anticipation. Paris awaited, they said, full of charm and uncertainty. The journey inland revealed a country balancing between fear and faith, fields freshly tilled beside camouflaged trucks, children saluting convoys as they passed. In Paris, Claire was outfitted with a khaki uniform and assigned to Section Sanitaire 13 under Captain Pierre Moreau. The motor pool introduced her to Henri, a mechanic with oil-stained hands and a quick grin, who taught her how to double-clutch and pray in the same breath. She learned maps by heart, knowing soon every bend in France might be a battlefield.
By early May 1940, Claire's ambulance, white-painted with a red cross, rumbled north toward Sedan. The air smelled of spring flowers and smoke. Along the roads marched columns of French infantry, faces tired but dignified. She stopped for tea with them near a burned-out barn. "Merci, mademoiselle," one said, lifting a tin cup. Days later, the same man might be among the wounded she retrieved under shell fire. The German offensive had begun on May 10th. Reports came constantly. The Ardennes breached, the Meuse crossed. Claire drove through shattered towns, her hands tight on the wheel, as clouds of smoke turned daylight to dusk. Once, enemy planes roared overhead, dropping their loads beyond a hill. She pressed the accelerator, heart pounding as glass rattled and earth trembled. Her world had changed forever. The front was not a line, it was everywhere.
Sedan, May 14th, 1940. The thunder of artillery rolled across the Meuse like an endless storm. Flames licked the riverbanks as German Stuka screamed overhead, their bombs dropping with mechanical precision. Claire and her unit raced through the chaos, ambulance jolting over craters as she shouted coordinates to Henri. The wounded lay scattered along the roads, French, Belgian, civilians alike. In the chaos, she knelt beside an officer whose uniform was soaked in blood. "Hold on," she whispered, voice trembling as shells burst nearby. The world became a blur of fire and courage. Every turn was survival. That night, under a shattered bridge, the team worked by lantern light. "We can't save them all," Henri said softly. Claire looked at him, eyes haunted but resolute. "We'll save who we can."
In late May, orders came to withdraw south toward Reims. The roads were choked with retreating troops and endless refugees, farmers pushing carts, mothers clutching babies, soldiers silent in exhaustion. Claire's hands never stopped trembling as she maneuvered through the human tide. At dusk, near a small village, she found a wounded British gunner, barely conscious, beside his shattered vehicle. "You're safe now," she told him, though the world was anything but. German armor pressed ever closer. The sound of their engines haunted the horizon. That night, Claire wrote a letter home she would never send. "Mother, I've seen courage in the faces of strangers. If I don't come back, please remember them." She slept briefly in the driver's seat, hands still on the wheel, ready to move at a moment's word. News reached them of the British trapped at Dunkirk.
Though she was attached to a French unit, Claire volunteered to drive north again. The journey felt suicidal. German patrols prowled the main routes. The skies belonged to the Luftwaffe. Still, she pressed on through villages reduced to rubble, guided by instinct and desperation. Near Lille, she encountered a convoy of British Tommies, eyes hollow, uniforms caked in dirt. They called her Yank and waved as she passed, laughter mingling briefly with engine noise. When the Channel wind finally reached her face, she saw the fires of Dunkirk glowing on the horizon like the edge of the world. There, amid chaos and heroism, she would ferry the broken and the brave alike toward evacuation. Her ambulance became a vessel of hope amid ruin.
Dunkirk, June 1st, 1940. The beach was a landscape of desperation. Columns of uniformed men stretching into the sea, awaiting rescue. Claire's ambulance became her world, ferrying the wounded from dunes to tenders under constant bombardment. The air was thick with cordite and sand. A British medic shouted, "Keep moving, love, they're coming again." Dive bombers swooped low, engines howling. A blast threw her against the door, pain flashing white, but she rose, blood on her face, and started the engine anew. By night, the sea burned faintly under the aurora of war, and she could hear hymns sung by soldiers waiting to leave. For every man she carried, 3 more remained. Still she drove, headlights off, guided by firelight and willpower. History would remember Dunkirk as a miracle. She would remember it as endurance.
When France fell on June 22, 1940, the guns went silent, but the silence was unbearable. Claire found herself in Marseille, stationed briefly under Vichy supervision. The war seemed over for some, yet she knew it had only changed shape. Gone were the uniforms and salutes. Instead came whispered resistance and empty rations. She spent her days tending to refugee children, and her nights wondering if it had all meant anything. "You did your duty," Henri told her, repairing the engine one final time before departing north. She watched him go, the weight of absence settling heavy in her chest. For the first time in months, she removed her uniform jacket, folded it neatly, and stared at the red cross stitched on its sleeve, a symbol that had outlasted empires.
In a small rented room above a cafe, Claire began to write again. Letters to her mother, to fallen friends, to herself. "The world is burning, but people still share bread," she wrote. Every sound of marching boots through the street reminded her that the occupation had begun. Yet beneath that oppression, sparks of defiance grew. She helped smuggle bandages and food through contacts in the French Red Cross, always glancing over her shoulder. Her courage had changed flavor. It was quieter now, deliberate, yet no less fierce. Sometimes she'd take the old ambulance out into the hills to deliver supplies. The roads were the same, but the flags had changed. When she looked in the rear-view mirror, she saw not defeat, but survival, and in that reflection, a promise that one day the world would heal.
Autumn 1940. Claire returned to America aboard a merchant vessel heavy with refugees. The ocean seemed endless again, but she felt older, her innocence left somewhere on those French roads. In New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty emerged through mist, its torch bright against the gray dawn. Reporters asked her about the fall of France, but she said little. In her mind lived 1,000 images, a wounded soldier smiling through pain, flames reflected in rainwater, the sound of Henri laughing beside a half-repaired engine. Home felt strange, peaceful yet unreal. She took work at a hospital, and sometimes when sirens wailed outside during training drills, she closed her eyes and remembered that other siren, the one that called her into history. And though the war raged on elsewhere, her mission remained, to heal, whatever the cost.